My name is Eleanor Johnson, and at 67, I thought I knew my daughter Madison better than anyone. For 35 years we shared everything. Or so I believed. That Tuesday afternoon when she left her phone on my kitchen counter changed everything. The call that came through revealed a plot so cruel, so calculated, I could barely recognize my own child in those words. What I heard broke my heart, but what I did next would show her I was nobody to underestimate. Before I continue, where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and join me as I reveal how I turned the tables. Life after Robert passed away 5 years ago had been a gradual adjustment. My husband of 42 years left suddenly from a heart attack, leaving me alone in our modest suburban home in Mapleton. The two-bedroom house with its white picket fence and garden full of hydrangeas had been our sanctuary for decades. Now it was just me, surrounded by memories and the quiet rhythms of widowhood. Madison had been my rock during those first brutal months of grief. Every Sunday without fail, she would arrive with groceries and stay for dinner. We would cook together, talk about her week at the marketing agency where she worked, and watch old movies. These Sunday dinners became sacred to me, a touchstone of normalcy when everything else felt adrift. "Mom, you would love the new bistro downtown," Madison would say, her blue eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Next week I'll bring takeout from there instead of cooking." I treasured these moments, watching my beautiful daughter blossom into her mid-30s with a successful career and vibrant social life. Madison had always been independent, smart as a whip with her father's analytical mind and my stubborn determination. She was my only child, born when I was 32 after years of trying, my miracle baby. Things began to change about 18 months ago when Madison met Garrett Reynolds. She brought him to Sunday dinner, a handsome man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and an expensive watch. He worked in real estate development, specializing in commercial properties and luxury condominiums. "Eleanor, Madison tells me you were a school librarian," Garrett said during that first dinner, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "What a noble profession." There was something in his tone that felt condescending, but I brushed it aside. Madison seemed happy, practically glowing whenever he spoke. If he made my daughter happy, who was I to find fault? They married 6 months later in a lavish ceremony at the Grand Mapleton Hotel. The wedding was far more extravagant than anything Madison would have chosen before meeting Garrett. 300 guests, many of whom she barely knew, champagne flowing from fountains, and a dress that cost more than my car. "Isn't it magnificent, Mom?" Madison twirled in her beaded gown, looking beautiful but somehow unfamiliar. "It's certainly grand, sweetheart," I replied, wondering what had happened to her original dream of a simple garden ceremony. After the honeymoon in Bali, Madison and Garrett moved into a sprawling modern house in the exclusive Oak Ridge neighborhood. Their lifestyle shifted dramatically. Suddenly, Madison was attending charity galas, country club events, and spending weekends at spa retreats with women she called friends, but spoke about with subtle disdain when they weren't around. Our Sunday dinners became less frequent. First it was every other week, then once a month, then whenever they could fit it in between their social obligations. When Madison did visit, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone and speaking in vague terms about their life together. "Garrett says appearances matter in his business," she explained when I asked about her new designer wardrobe and dramatically different hairstyle. The warm auburn waves I'd always loved were now platinum blonde and cut in a severe bob that hardened her features. I filled my days with gardening, volunteering at the local literacy center where I taught adults to read, and my weekly book club with Nancy Wilson, Judith Baker, and Patricia Thompson, friends from my teaching days. I kept busy, tried not to feel hurt by Madison's gradual pulling away. That's what children do after all. They build their own lives. But there were concerning changes I couldn't ignore. Madison, who had always been thoughtful and considerate, began canceling plans at the last minute. She forgot my birthday, something that had never happened before. When I called, she often sounded strange, as though reading from a script. Conversations that once flowed easily became stilted and superficial. "How are you really doing, Madison?" I asked during one of her increasingly rare visits. "Everything's perfect, Mom," she replied with a brittle smile. "Garrett just closed a huge deal on a new development project. We're thinking of buying a vacation home in Aspen." Perfect. That word kept coming up, along with wonderful and amazing whenever I asked about her marriage or their life together. Yet her eyes told a different story, darting away from mine, a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. Nancy, my closest friend, noticed it too. "Eleanor, does Madison seem different to you lately?" she asked during our book club meeting. "Last time I saw her at the supermarket, she barely stopped to say hello, and she was wearing sunglasses inside the store." I defended my daughter, making excuses about her busy schedule and new social circle, but privately my concern grew. The contrast between my quiet, book-filled home with its garden and bird feeders and their sleek, minimalist mansion with marble floors and abstract art neither of them seemed to actually like was stark. I felt as though Madison was slipping away into a world where I couldn't follow, and worse, a world that didn't seem to bring her joy. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. Madison had stopped by unexpectedly, something that rarely happened anymore. "I was in the neighborhood for a meeting," she explained, though her business casual attire suggested otherwise. She seemed nervous, checking her watch repeatedly. We had tea in my sunroom, surrounded by potted ferns and the collection of porcelain birds Robert had given me over the years. Madison barely touched her drink, asking pointed questions about my finances, whether I'd updated my will recently, and if I ever felt overwhelmed living alone in this house. "I manage just fine," I assured her. "This home keeps me close to your father's memory." Something flickered across her face then, an emotion I couldn't quite name. Before I could question it, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and stood abruptly. "I have to take this. Work emergency," she said, hurrying into the kitchen for privacy. I busied myself tidying the tea things, giving her space. When several minutes passed and the call seemed to be growing more intense based on her hushed but urgent tone, I decided to check if everything was all right. And that's when my world tilted on its axis, when everything I thought I knew about my daughter and the life she'd built came crashing down around me. Madison's phone lay on the granite countertop, screen unlocked and still connected to an active call. She had stepped outside onto the back patio, pacing back and forth with her back to the kitchen windows. I approached the counter intending to let her know I could hear her conversation, when Garrett's voice came through the speaker, clear and cold. "Did you get the papers from her desk? The one showing her house value?" I froze, my hand hovering above the phone. This was clearly a private conversation between husband and wife. I should announce my presence. But something in his tone, something calculating and unfamiliar, kept me rooted to the spot. "Not yet," Madison replied, her voice drifting in from the patio. "She keeps talking about Dad and memories, making this harder than it needs to be. We need those property assessments, Maddie. The development can't move forward without her lot. It's the last piece we need." "Development? My lot?" I stood perfectly still, barely breathing as the conversation continued. I know. I'm working on it. She's just so stubborn about staying here." Garrett's laugh was sharp without humor. "That's why we discussed the other approach, remember? If she won't sell willingly, we need to establish that she can't manage on her own anymore." A chill ran through me despite the warm kitchen. I leaned against the counter for support as my daughter responded. "The medication switch is already working. She was definitely confused last week when I visited. Couldn't find her glasses even though they were on her head." My hand flew to my face in shock. My missing blood pressure medication that I'd finally found in the guest bathroom, instead of my medicine cabinet. The strange drowsiness I'd been experiencing in the afternoons. The misplaced items I was certain I'd left elsewhere. "Good," Garrett continued. "Dr. Phillips is on board. He'll back us up about her cognitive decline if we need it for the competency hearing. Has she noticed the cameras yet?" "Cameras?" I glanced around my kitchen, suddenly feeling violated in my own home. "No," Madison replied. "They're well hidden. I've got footage of her forgetting to turn off the stove, getting lost coming back from the mailbox, all sorts of useful little moments." Tears burned in my eyes as the betrayal sank in. My own daughter was systematically gaslighting me, making me appear incompetent, unfit to manage my own affairs. Perfect. Between the medication confusion, the documented episodes, and Dr. Phillips' assessment, we should have enough to convince a judge she needs assisted living. Once you have power of attorney, we can sell the property, and the Riverside Point development can finally move forward. The nursing home in Westridge has an opening next month, Madison added, and the casual way she discussed discarding me broke something inside my heart. It's not great, but it's all we can afford if we want to maximize profit from the house sale. Not great is fine, Garrett laughed again. It's not like she'll be there long anyway, given her deteriorating condition. The implication in his tone sent ice through my veins. Were they suggesting what I thought they were? That once I was out of the way, declared incompetent and locked away, my health would mysteriously decline further? Garrett, don't talk like that, Madison scolded. But there was no real conviction in her voice. Someone might hear you. Who's going to hear me? You're alone with your confused old mother, who probably can't remember what she had for breakfast. This is business, Madison. Big business. The Riverside Point development will put us in a completely different league. No more scraping by on commissions and your pathetic marketing salary. I'd heard enough. With shaking hands, I pressed the mute button on the phone so they wouldn't hear me, and backed away from the counter. My mind raced with the implications of what I'd just discovered. My daughter and her husband were plotting to have me declared incompetent, seize control of my assets, sell my beloved home for their development project, and warehouse me in a substandard nursing home. The back door opened and Madison stepped inside, still holding her cell phone to her ear. She startled when she saw me standing there. Mom, I didn't see you there. Her eyes darted to her phone on the counter, then back to me. I need to finish this call. Work crisis. I nodded, summoning every acting skill I possessed to appear normal, clueless. Of course, dear. Would you like more tea when you're done? Relief flooded her features. No thanks. Actually, I need to get going after this call. Lots to do today. I busied myself at the sink, washing teacups while my mind spun with revelations and betrayal. Madison finished her call, making a show of discussing marketing strategies and deadlines. When she hung up, she retrieved her phone from the counter, checking it quickly before dropping it into her expensive handbag. Everything okay at work? I asked mildly. Just the usual chaos before a product launch, she replied with a practiced smile. Sorry to cut this short, Mom. Before you go, I said, keeping my voice steady, I was wondering if you'd help me find my backup reading glasses. I seem to have misplaced them. A flash of something, satisfaction perhaps, crossed her face. See, this is what worries me, Mom. You've been so forgetful lately. Are you sure you're doing okay here all alone? The concern in her voice sounded genuine, and for a moment I almost doubted what I'd heard. But then I remembered Garrett's cold laugh, the cameras hidden in my home, the switched medication. I'm just fine, I assured her. Senior moment, that's all. After Madison left, I sat at my kitchen table and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to fall apart. Tears streamed down my face as I confronted the unthinkable betrayal by my only child. The daughter I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, was methodically working to destroy my life for profit. When my 5 minutes were up, I dried my eyes and made a decision. I would not confront Madison and Garrett immediately. Accusations would only put them on guard, perhaps accelerate their timeline. No, I needed evidence. I needed allies. I needed a plan. They thought I was a sweet, confused old woman, easy to manipulate and discard. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Eleanor Johnson might be 67, but she was nobody's fool. And she was about to become their worst nightmare. My first call was to Nancy Wilson. At 69, Nancy had worked as a legal secretary for 40 years before retirement. More importantly, she had a mind like a steel trap and a network of connections throughout Mapleton. Can you come over? It's urgent, I said when she answered. And Nancy, don't tell anyone you're visiting me. She arrived 20 minutes later, concern etched on her kind face. Eleanor, what on earth is going on? You sounded terrified on the phone. I led her into the backyard, away from the house where unknown cameras might be recording. Under the shade of the old maple tree, I told her everything I'd overheard. Nancy's expression shifted from concern to outrage. Those conniving vultures. Eleanor, this is elder abuse, plain and simple. I need proof, I replied. My word against theirs won't be enough, especially if they've been documenting my supposed decline. Nancy's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. First things first. We need to find those cameras and figure out what medication they've been giving you. We entered the house, pretending to chat casually about her grandson's baseball game, while systematically searching each room. Nancy found the first camera disguised as a decorative button on my living room curtains. I discovered another hidden in a fake smoke detector in the kitchen. By the end of our search, we'd located 6 surveillance devices throughout my home. Don't remove them, Nancy advised. They need to think their plan is still working. Next, we gathered all my medication bottles and compared them with Nancy's identical prescriptions. The pills in my blood pressure medication look similar but not identical to Nancy's. We need to get these analyzed, she said, carefully separating several pills into an envelope. My nephew works at the hospital pharmacy. He can tell us what these really are. Over the next few days, I maintained the pretense of normalcy while beginning my counteroffensive. Nancy's nephew confirmed my suspicions. My blood pressure medication had been replaced with a mild sedative, explaining my afternoon drowsiness and occasional confusion. This is criminal, Nancy fumed when she delivered the news. They're drugging you. I replaced the tampered medication with my proper prescription, keeping a sample of the false pills as evidence. Immediately, my head began to clear, my energy returning. With Nancy's help, I contacted Harold Green, a retired attorney from our book club who specialized in elder law. Harold was 74, sharp as a tack, and still maintained connections with the local bar association. This is serious, Eleanor, Harold said after I explained the situation in his book-lined home office. They're laying groundwork for a conservatorship. Once they have that, they can legally make decisions about your property, your finances, even your medical care. How do I stop them? I asked. Documentation, Harold replied firmly. We need to establish your mental competence beyond any doubt. I'll arrange for an independent medical evaluation with a geriatric specialist not connected to Dr. Phillips. We'll need to document the medication tampering, the surveillance without consent, everything. While Harold made arrangements, I continued my investigation into Garrett's background. Nancy's former colleague at the law firm ran a discreet background check that revealed disturbing information. Garrett Reynolds was born Gary Renner, Nancy reported, spreading documents across my dining room table. He changed his name after several failed business ventures and a bankruptcy filing 10 years ago. There are also 2 settled lawsuits from elderly property owners claiming he used deceptive practices to acquire their land for below market value. And Madison? I asked, dreading the answer. How involved was she in his previous schemes? Nancy hesitated. No mention of her in these cases. They predate their relationship. But Eleanor, there's something else you should see. She pushed forward a printout of a real estate development proposal for Riverside Point luxury condominiums. My blood ran cold as I studied the architectural renderings showing a massive complex situated exactly where my neighborhood currently stood. My property was highlighted in red, labeled acquisition pending. This development would be worth millions, I whispered. And your property is the final piece they need, Nancy confirmed. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to pay an unannounced visit to Madison and Garrett's home. I told them I was dropping off some of Madison's childhood memorabilia I'd found while cleaning. Their sleek modern house felt impersonal and cold, more like a furniture showroom than a home. Madison seemed flustered by my unexpected appearance. Mom, you should have called first. We're heading out to a charity function soon. This won't take long, I assured her, setting down the box of items. Oh my, I seem to have forgotten my reading glasses. Madison, would you mind checking if I left them in the car? While she was outside, I quickly slipped into Garrett's home office. On his desk lay architectural plans for Riverside Point, alongside a legal document titled Petition for Conservatorship. My name was clearly visible on the partially completed form. I quickly photographed everything with the small camera Harold had provided, my hands shaking with a mixture of fear and determination. I was replacing the documents when I heard voices approaching. Ducking into the adjacent bathroom, I pressed myself against the wall as Garrett and another man entered the office. The old woman is the last holdout, Garrett was saying. Once we have control of her property, construction can begin immediately. And you're sure you can get the conservatorship? the stranger asked. Absolutely. My wife has been laying the groundwork for months. Doctors on board. We've documented episodes of confusion, medication mix-ups. It's practically a done deal. Good. The investors are getting impatient. That riverside property is prime real estate. I remained hidden until they left, then slipped back to the living room just as Madison returned from checking my car. No glasses out there, Mom, she said. Are you sure you brought them? Oh, silly me, I replied, patting my pockets. They were here all along. Senior moment. I watched her exchange a knowing look with Garrett, who had just entered the room. Their smug certainty that their plan was working made my blood boil, but I maintained my facade of gentle confusion. Back at home, I met with Harold and Nancy to review what I'd discovered. Harold's son Thomas, a detective with the Mapleton Police Department, joined us. This is elder abuse and attempted fraud, Thomas stated firmly after reviewing our evidence. But building a case will take time. They're being careful, establishing a pattern of supposed cognitive decline before making their move. I can't just wait for them to strike, I protested. You won't have to, Thomas assured me. We're going to set a trap, and they're going to walk right into it. Over the next 2 weeks, we implemented our counter-strategy. I visited Dr. Elaine Peterson, a respected geriatric specialist who conducted a thorough cognitive assessment and declared me exceptionally sharp for any age. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, transferring most of my assets where Madison couldn't access them. Harold helped me update my will, explicitly excluding Madison and Garrett from any inheritance, and including a statement about the attempts to declare me incompetent. Most importantly, I began keeping a detailed journal documenting every interaction with Madison and Garrett, every accident they staged in my home, every patronizing comment and suspicious occurrence. I installed my own hidden cameras to capture their attempts to manipulate my environment. When Madison accidentally turned up my thermostat to 80 degrees then expressed concern about my ability to manage household systems, my camera caught her in the act. When Garrett helpfully fixed my porch step but actually loosened the boards, creating a hazard, that too was recorded. I played along, pretending not to notice their manipulations, acting increasingly vague and forgetful in their presence. Each time they left, believing their plan was working, I meticulously added to my growing collection of evidence. You're doing brilliantly, Eleanor, Harold encouraged me after reviewing our documentation. But be careful. As they get closer to filing for conservatorship, they might escalate their efforts. His warning proved prescient. The very next day, Madison arrived with Dr. Phillips for a routine wellness check I hadn't scheduled. Just looking out for you, Mom, Madison said sweetly while Dr. Phillips asked leading questions clearly designed to expose cognitive deficits. I played my role perfectly, occasionally appearing confused but not enough to justify immediate intervention. Dr. Phillips left with a concerned frown, promising to follow up soon. That evening, I received a call from Madison. Mom, Garrett and I have been talking. We're worried about you living alone. What would you think about moving somewhere with more support? There's a lovely facility in Westridge. The same substandard nursing home they discussed on the phone. My hand tightened on the receiver. Oh, I don't know, dear, I said, injecting uncertainty into my voice. This is my home. Just think about it, she pressed. We could come look at it together this weekend. After hanging up, I called our team. They're accelerating the timeline, I told Harold, Nancy, and Thomas. We need to move forward with our plan now. Thomas nodded grimly. I'll get the warrant ready. We'll need one more piece of solid evidence to trigger it. Leave that to me, I said, a plan already forming in my mind. The following Sunday, Madison and Garrett arrived for dinner, a rare occurrence these days. Madison carried a glossy brochure for Westridge Senior Living, while Garrett brought an expensive bottle of wine he insisted I try. It will help you relax, Eleanor, he said with that smile that never reached his eyes. You seem tense lately. I pretended to sip the wine while actually pouring it into a potted plant when they weren't looking. Based on their previous actions, I wouldn't put it past them to drug me openly now that their plan was reaching its conclusion. Throughout dinner, they tag-teamed their manipulation. Madison shared concerns about my recent behavior, while Garrett steered the conversation toward the difficulties of maintaining an older home. Real estate in this area is booming, he mentioned casually. You could sell this place for a small fortune, Eleanor. More than enough to live comfortably at Westridge for years. The neighborhood is changing, Madison added. It's not safe for you anymore. After dinner, Madison excused herself to use the bathroom. I knew from our surveillance that she would use this opportunity to plant more evidence of my decline. Sure enough, the camera in my bedroom captured her rearranging my medication, removing labels from several bottles. When she returned, I decided to push them further. You know, I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe it is time to consider my options. The look of triumph that flashed between them was almost comical. That's very sensible, Mom, Madison said, reaching for her purse. Actually, I happen to have some paperwork we could look at tonight. Garrett pulled out a folder containing assisted living contracts and, most tellingly, power of attorney documents already filled out with Madison's information. These are just preliminary forms, he explained smoothly. Nothing to worry about, just standard procedure for Westridge. I took the papers with trembling hands that weren't entirely an act. Seeing the documentation of their betrayal in black and white was still painful, despite knowing what they were planning. I'll need to read through these carefully, I said. Of course, Madison replied, though her tone suggested the opposite. But the space at Westridge might not be available for long. They have a waiting list. As they prepared to leave, Madison discovered that I had left the stove on, making a show of how dangerous it was. What she didn't know was that I had deliberately left it on while Harold watched through our security feed, documenting her planting of evidence. Mom, this is exactly why we're worried, she scolded. You could burn the house down. I'm so sorry, I murmured, looking appropriately distressed. I don't know how I forgot. After they left, I contacted Harold immediately. They brought the power of attorney documents. It's happening. 2 days later, Madison arrived alone, expression grave. Mom, we need to talk. Garrett and I met with Dr. Phillips yesterday. He's concerned about some cognitive changes he's noticed. I sat quietly on my sofa, hands folded in my lap. He thinks it would be best if you had a more thorough evaluation. There are treatments that can help slow down memory loss if we catch it early. I see, I said softly. And you agree with him? Madison sat beside me, taking my hand in what appeared to be a gesture of comfort but felt like restraint. Mom, I've noticed things too. The stove incident, your confusion with medications, getting lost in your own neighborhood. All staged events they had either manufactured or recorded out of context. Mrs. Peterson down the street mentioned seeing you in your garden at 3 in the morning last week, Madison continued. This was news to me. Did she? Yes. You were in your nightgown talking to Dad. A complete fabrication. I hadn't spoken to Mrs. Peterson in at least a month, and I certainly hadn't been gardening in the middle of the night. Madison, I said carefully. I don't remember that. Exactly, she pressed, sensing an advantage. That's what worries me. These episodes you don't remember. The performance was masterful. Had I not overheard their original conversation, had I not gathered evidence of their manipulation, I might have begun to doubt myself. This was gaslighting at its most insidious. A daughter using intimate knowledge of her mother to create the perfect trap. What do you want me to do? I asked, injecting resignation into my voice. Relief flooded her features. We have an appointment with a specialist tomorrow. Just an evaluation. And maybe we could look at Westridge afterward? Just to see it. I nodded slowly. If you think it's best. Madison hugged me, and I forced myself to hug back, though every fiber of my being recoiled from her touch. As she embraced me, I felt her slip something into my sweater pocket. After she left, I discovered it was a sedative, disguised as an antacid tablet. She had wanted me compliant for tomorrow's evaluation. That night, I hosted an emergency meeting with Harold, Nancy, and Thomas. We gathered in Nancy's home, away from the surveillance in mine. They're making their move, I reported. Madison scheduled an appointment with a specialist tomorrow who will undoubtedly find me incompetent. Then straight to Westridge to ease me into the idea of institutional living. Harold reviewed our evidence. We have enough. The medication tampering, the surveillance without consent, the documented staging of incidents, and now this. He held up the sedative tablet in an evidence bag. Attempted drugging. Thomas nodded. The judge granted our warrant based on the evidence we've collected. We can execute it tomorrow. No, I said firmly. Not tomorrow. I have a better idea. I outlined my plan, watching their expressions shift from concern to reluctant admiration. It's risky, Nancy warned. So is doing nothing, I countered. They've built their case methodically. If we don't end this conclusively, they might try again, perhaps more carefully next time. Thomas sighed. You're right. We need to catch them red-handed, with no room for denial. Are you sure you're up for this, Eleanor? Harold asked gently. It will be emotionally taxing. I thought of Madison as a little girl, holding my hand as we walked to the library together. I remembered teaching her to read, bandaging scraped knees, celebrating achievements big and small. I recalled the daughter who had comforted me after Robert's death, who had once been the person I trusted most in the world. Then I thought of her cold voice discussing my disposal as though I were an inconvenient piece of furniture, plotting with her husband to drug me, institutionalize me, and steal my home. I'm sure, I said, steel in my voice. It's time to end this. The next morning, I called Madison to cancel our appointment with the specialist. I'm not feeling well, I explained. Perhaps we could reschedule for next week? Her frustration was palpable even over the phone. Mom, this is important. We've been waiting 3 weeks for this appointment. An interesting slip, considering she'd only mentioned the appointment to me yesterday. I know, dear, but I really don't feel up to it. Why don't you and Garrett come over for dinner this Friday instead? We can discuss everything then. After some resistance, Madison agreed. This gave us 3 days to finalize our preparations. Harold, Nancy, and I met with Thomas at the police station to review every detail of our plan. The evidence we had collected was substantial. The tampered medication confirmed by laboratory analysis, video footage of Madison and Garrett staging incidents in my home, the unauthorized surveillance equipment they had installed, recordings of their conversations about having me declared incompetent, and documentation of the Riverside Point development that hinged on acquiring my property. We'll have officers stationed nearby, Thomas explained. Once we have a clear confession on record, they'll move in. Harold helped me prepare a script of sorts, questions designed to elicit incriminating responses. The key is to appear confused but gradually reveal your awareness, he advised. Give them enough rope to hang themselves. Nancy's role would be to arrive mid-confrontation, providing additional witness testimony and moral support. I'll bring my famous blueberry pie as an excuse, she said with grim determination. Those vultures won't know what hit them. Back at home, I methodically prepared for the confrontation. With Thomas's help, I installed additional hidden recording devices throughout my living room and kitchen. We removed the cameras Madison and Garrett had placed, repositioning them to capture less incriminating angles. I wanted them confident but careless. I practiced my performance extensively, perfecting the right balance of initial confusion giving way to horrified comprehension. Harold watched critically, offering suggestions to make my realization more convincing. Remember, they believe you're already compromised, he reminded me. They won't expect a coherent defense. The day before our planned confrontation, I visited Dr. Peterson again for a comprehensive cognitive assessment, establishing a clear medical record of my mental competence. I also made a video statement with Harold present as witness, detailing the plot against me and affirming my sound mind in case anything went wrong with our plan. As a final precaution, I transferred copies of all our evidence to a secure location only Harold could access. If Madison and Garrett somehow outmaneuvered us, the truth would still come to light. The morning of the confrontation, I woke early, my determination momentarily wavering as grief washed over me. Regardless of the outcome tonight, I was losing my daughter. Even if Madison claimed manipulation by Garrett, even if she expressed remorse, the trust between us was irreparably shattered. The child I had raised, loved unconditionally, and supported unwaveringly had conspired to destroy me for profit. I allowed myself 30 minutes to mourn this loss, tears flowing freely as I clutched the photo album documenting Madison's childhood. Then I dried my eyes, put away the photos, and steeled myself for what needed to be done. Nancy arrived mid-morning to help me prepare. We cooked Madison's favorite meal, beef stroganoff, as though this were simply a family dinner. The normalcy of chopping onions and stirring sauce was oddly comforting amidst the surreal circumstances. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Eleanor?" Nancy asked as we set the dining room table. "We could still let Thomas handle it entirely." I shook my head firmly. "I need to confront them myself. I need Madison to look me in the eye when the truth comes out." By 6 o'clock, everything was ready. The recording devices were activated, officers were stationed discreetly nearby, and Nancy had departed temporarily, scheduled to return at 7:30. I changed into a cardigan and slacks, deliberately choosing clothes that made me appear more frail and elderly than I felt. At 6:15, Madison's car pulled into my driveway. She and Garrett arrived carrying a bottle of wine and a folder of documents. The final act was about to begin. "Something smells delicious," Madison commented as they entered, kissing my cheek with practiced affection. "Beef stroganoff," I replied. "Your favorite." "How thoughtful," Garrett said, his smile calculating as he assessed my demeanor. "How are you feeling today, Eleanor? Madison mentioned you weren't well yesterday." "Oh, much better now," I assured him, deliberately knocking over a salt shaker as I guided them to the living room. "Just a little tired. Senior moments, you know." The predatory gleam in his eyes told me he was buying my performance. As Madison helped me clean up the spilled salt, Garrett placed the folder on my coffee table, positioning it prominently. "We brought some information about Westridge," he explained smoothly, "and a few other documents for you to look at. Nothing urgent, just some things to consider." "That's very thoughtful," I murmured. "Shall we have dinner first? I've been cooking all day." Throughout the meal, I played my role perfectly, occasionally losing track of conversations, repeating questions I'd already asked, and appearing increasingly confused. Madison and Garrett exchanged meaningful glances, clearly believing their plan was working. After dinner, Garrett suggested we review the documents he'd brought. "Just some preliminary paperwork," he explained as we settled in the living room. "Given your recent episodes, Madison and I think it would be prudent to put some safeguards in place." "Episodes?" I asked, injecting uncertainty into my voice. "Mom," Madison said gently, taking my hand. "You know you haven't been yourself lately. The incident with the stove, wandering outside at night, confusion with your medications." "I suppose I have been a bit forgetful," I conceded. Garrett jumped on this admission. "Exactly. And that's why these documents are important. This one," he said, sliding forward a power of attorney form, "would allow Madison to help manage your finances if you become unable to do so." "And this one," Madison added, presenting the Westridge contract, "is just information about a lovely community where you'd have support and care." I examined the papers with exaggerated concentration, noting the clauses giving Madison complete control over my assets, and the Westridge contract committing me to their cheapest care option despite its poor ratings. It seems so complicated. I sighed. What about my house? What would happen to it? The trap was set. I watched them exchange a quick glance, silently deciding how much to reveal. "Well," Garrett began carefully, "maintaining this house is expensive, Eleanor. If you were at Westridge, it would make sense to sell it." "I see," I nodded slowly. "And who would decide that?" "About selling my house. Madison would if you signed this power of attorney," he explained, his tone suggesting he was talking to a child. "But only if it became necessary." "And when might that be?" I pressed gently. Madison jumped in. "Only if you became unable to make decisions yourself, Mom. This is just a precaution." I pretended to consider this, watching their barely concealed impatience. "You know, I've lived here for 40 years. So many memories with your father, with you growing up." "I know, Mom," Madison said, squeezing my hand with false sympathy. "But sometimes we need to let go of the past for what's best now." "What's best for whom?" I asked, allowing a hint of clarity to enter my voice. Madison blinked, caught off guard by my sudden sharpness. "For you, of course." Not for Riverside Point luxury condominiums? I asked quietly. The stunned silence that followed was deeply satisfying. Madison's face drained of color while Garrett's features hardened into a mask. I don't know what you're talking about, he recovered quickly. Eleanor, you seem confused again. I'm not confused, Garrett, I stated firmly, dropping all pretense of frailty. I know exactly what you and Madison have been planning. The doorbell rang right on cue. Nancy had arrived for her part in our choreographed confrontation. Excuse me while I get that, I said, standing straight and steady, no longer hunched or tentative. I returned with Nancy, who carried her promised blueberry pie and an expression of steel beneath her grandmotherly appearance. Nancy, Madison stammered. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, Nancy replied coldly, setting down her pie. Eleanor invited me to help her discuss some important matters with you both. Mom's not feeling well, Madison attempted. Perhaps this isn't the best time for company. I'm feeling perfectly well, I countered, taking my seat again. In fact, I'm more clear-headed than I've been in months, now that I'm taking my actual medication instead of the sedatives you switched them with. Madison's sharp intake of breath told me we'd scored a direct hit. Garrett placed a warning hand on her arm. Eleanor, these accusations are concerning, he said smoothly. They suggest exactly the kind of paranoid thinking Dr. Phillips mentioned. Dr. Phillips, I nodded. Yes, let's talk about him. The doctor you bribed to falsify reports about my mental state. This is ridiculous, Garrett scoffed, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead. Madison, I think we should reschedule this discussion when your mother is more stable. You're not going anywhere, Nancy interjected firmly. Not until Eleanor has her say. I leaned forward, looking directly into my daughter's eyes. I know everything, Madison. I heard your phone conversation with Garrett when you left it on speaker in my kitchen. I know about the surveillance cameras you installed in my home without consent. I know about the medication tampering, the staged episodes, the falsified medical reports. Madison's face crumpled. Mom, I don't know what you think you heard, but what I think I heard. I repeated, anger finally breaking through. I heard my daughter discussing putting me in a substandard nursing home, so she could sell my property for a development deal. I heard her husband suggesting my health would deteriorate once I was out of the way. That's not what he meant, Madison protested weakly. I reached beneath the coffee table and withdrew a folder of my own. I have proof, Madison. Laboratory analysis of the tampered medication. Video footage of you staging episodes in my home. Recordings of your conversations about having me declared incompetent. Garrett stood abruptly. This is preposterous. We're leaving. Sit down, Mr. Reynolds. Or should I say Mr. Renner? Nancy commanded. The police are outside, and they have some questions about your previous elder abuse cases in Arizona and Nevada. His face contorted with rage. You have no idea who you're dealing with, you interfering old. Garrett, stop. Madison interrupted, panic rising in her voice. Mom, please, this is all a misunderstanding. Is it? I asked, opening the folder to reveal the Riverside Point development plans. Is it a misunderstanding that my property is the final piece needed for your husband's development? That you've been systematically working to have me declared incompetent, so you could gain control of my assets? It wasn't like that, Madison whispered, tears forming. Not at first. Tell me how it was, I demanded, my voice breaking slightly despite my resolve. Tell me how my daughter became someone who could do this to her own mother. The stage was set. All we needed now was a confession. Madison looked from me to Garrett, then back again, trapped between her husband's warning glare and my unwavering gaze. The moment stretched, taut with decades of shared history and the weight of her betrayal. Garrett said it would be easy, she finally whispered, shoulders slumping in defeat. Just a few months of careful documentation, a sympathetic doctor, and the courts would grant me conservatorship. Madison, shut up, Garrett hissed, grabbing her arm roughly. She pulled away from him. No. It's over. She knows everything. I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact with my daughter. Why, Madison? After everything we've been through together, why would you do this to me? The money, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. Garrett's company is in trouble. We're drowning in debt. The Riverside Point development was our last chance. Without your property, it falls apart. So you decided to have me declared incompetent and locked away. I said, the pain of her betrayal still raw despite my preparation. It wasn't supposed to be like that, Madison insisted. Westridge was just temporary, until we could figure out something better. Liar. Nancy interjected sharply. We have recordings of you discussing how Eleanor wouldn't be there long anyway, given her deteriorating condition. Madison's eyes widened. That was Garrett, not me. I never wanted to hurt you, Mom. But you did nothing to stop it, I pointed out. You switched my medication. You installed cameras to spy on me. You staged incidents to make me appear confused and incompetent. Garrett said it was for your own good, she whispered. That you'd be safer in a facility with round-the-clock care. While you profited from selling my home, I finished for her. Garrett suddenly stood, his composure cracking. Enough of this melodrama. You have no actual proof of anything illegal. Concerned family members looking out for an elderly parent's welfare happens every day. Is that what you told the Simmons family in Phoenix? I asked calmly. And the Abernethys in Las Vegas? Before you took their properties for development opportunities that mysteriously fell through after you sold the land at a profit. His face darkened. You know nothing about my business dealings. We know everything, Mr. Reynolds, Nancy countered, removing a file from her bag. Harold has been quite thorough in his investigation. Who the hell is Harold? He demanded. As if on cue, the doorbell rang again. Nancy smiled grimly. That would be him now. Harold entered with Thomas, both men carrying official-looking folders. Thomas was in plainclothes but displayed his badge briefly to Garrett, whose face paled visibly. Madison Reynolds and Garrett Reynolds, Thomas began formally. I'm Detective Thomas Green. We have some questions regarding allegations of elder abuse, attempted fraud, illegal surveillance, and medication tampering. This is harassment, Garrett blustered. We came here to help Eleanor plan for her future care, and she's twisted everything with paranoid accusations. Interesting perspective, Harold remarked, opening his folder. Perhaps you could explain these documents we found in your office detailing plans to have Eleanor declared incompetent? Or these? He produced photographs of the surveillance equipment removed from my home. Or this laboratory analysis of Eleanor's medication showing substitution with sedatives? Madison had shrunk into herself, tears flowing freely now. I never meant for it to go this far. What did you think would happen? I asked her, my voice breaking despite my efforts to remain strong. Did you think I wouldn't notice being drugged? Being manipulated? Being betrayed by my only child? We needed the money, she repeated weakly. After Dad died, Garrett convinced me you'd be better off in assisted living anyway. He said it would be a kindness that you were lonely and struggling. I believed him. And the development deal? The millions you stood to make from selling my property. I pressed. That came later, she admitted. At first it really was about your welfare. Then Garrett showed me the Riverside Point plans, explained how your lot was the key piece. And suddenly it wasn't just about helping you anymore. Garrett lunged forward, grabbing the folder from Harold. This is all circumstantial. You have nothing that directly links me to any criminal activity. Thomas smiled coldly. Actually, Mr. Reynolds, we have quite a lot, including your full confession, recorded approximately 30 seconds ago. He gestured around the room, where our hidden cameras and microphones had captured everything. Garrett's face contorted with rage as he realized the trap he'd walked into. You set us up, he snarled at me. You manipulated this entire situation. Ironic choice of words, Nancy observed dryly. Garrett turned to Madison. Tell them it's all lies. Tell them your mother is confused, that we were trying to help her. Madison looked at him as though seeing him clearly for the first time. No. I'm done lying. She turned to me, shoulders slumped in defeat. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I am so sorry. Save your apologies, Garrett snapped. They have nothing concrete. It's our word against hers. Thomas stepped forward. Mr. Reynolds, we have executed a search warrant on your home office and vehicles. The evidence we've already uncovered, combined with Mrs. Johnson's documentation and your statements here tonight, is more than sufficient for multiple charges. He nodded to someone outside, and 2 uniformed officers entered my living room. Garrett Reynolds, you're under arrest for attempted fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, and illegal surveillance. As the officers read him his rights, Garrett's composed facade finally shattered. This is your mother's doing, he spat at Madison. Your weak, sentimental attachment to her ruined everything. I told you we should have moved more quickly. Madison flinched as though he'd struck her. As the officers led Garrett away, Thomas turned to her. Mrs. Reynolds, we have questions for you as well. You have the right to remain silent. I watched my daughter receive her Miranda warning with a surreal sense of detachment. This broken woman being led away in handcuffs was the baby I had cradled, the child I had raised, the adult I had trusted above all others. Eleanor, Harold said gently, his hand on my shoulder. Are you all right? I wasn't all right. I doubted I would be for a very long time. But I had survived, had fought back, had refused to be victimized. I will be, I told him with as much conviction as I could muster. As Madison reached the door, she turned back to me, eyes swimming with tears. Mom! I met her gaze steadily, my heart breaking anew at the sight of her devastation even as I acknowledged her responsibility. What you did was unforgivable, I told her quietly. But you're still my daughter. Always will be. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was the truth, complex and painful as our relationship had become. The officers led her away, and I sank onto my sofa, suddenly exhausted. Nancy sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. You were magnificent, she said firmly. Absolutely magnificent. I looked around my living room, the home Robert and I had built together, where we had raised our daughter, celebrated milestones, weathered storms. It was still mine. I was still here, still fighting, still Eleanor Johnson. Yes, I agreed, straightening my shoulders. I suppose I was. The weeks following the arrests passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and emotional upheaval. Garrett's case moved quickly, with the overwhelming evidence against him leaving little room for defense. He accepted a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence, receiving 8 years for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy charges. Madison's situation proved more complex. As the prosecution established, she had been a willing participant in the scheme, yet evidence suggested Garrett had been manipulative and controlling in their relationship. Psychological evaluations revealed a pattern of emotional abuse that, while not excusing her actions, provided context for her susceptibility to his influence. She's looking at probation and community service, Thomas explained during one of our regular update meetings. The judge took into account her cooperation, lack of prior criminal history, and evidence of coercive control in the relationship. I nodded, still processing my complicated feelings about my daughter's fate. Part of me wanted her to face severe consequences for her betrayal. Another part recognized the broken woman I'd seen that night was already suffering a punishment perhaps worse than any court could impose. How do you feel about that, Eleanor? Harold asked gently. Relieved, I think. I admitted after consideration. Sending Madison to prison wouldn't undo what happened. Perhaps this way, she has a chance to rebuild her life, to become someone better than who she was with Garrett. The story had captured public attention, with local news and even some national outlets covering what they called the ultimate betrayal of trust. I declined all interviews, valuing my privacy, but the exposure had unexpected benefits. Thomas informed me that several other elderly victims had come forward with similar stories about Garrett's previous business ventures, strengthening the case against him and bringing closure to other families. 3 months after the arrests, I received a letter from Madison. She was living with her college roommate in another state, attending therapy, and working at a local bookstore. The letter was 8 pages of heartfelt apology, explanation without excuse, and raw acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. I don't expect forgiveness, she wrote. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I am working every day to understand how I became someone capable of such cruelty to the person who has always loved me most in this world. I am so deeply sorry, Mom. I read the letter multiple times, allowing myself to feel the complicated tangle of love, hurt, anger, and lingering attachment. I didn't respond immediately, needing time to determine what, if anything, I wanted to say to my daughter. Meanwhile, life continued. The investigation had uncovered 12 other elderly residents in my neighborhood who had been approached by Garrett's company with suspiciously similar tactics. Together, we formed a support group that met weekly in my living room, sharing stories, healing together, and developing strategies to protect ourselves and other seniors from similar schemes. What happened to you could happen to any of us, said Edith Wilson, an 82-year-old widow who had nearly signed over her property before her son intervened. You've helped us all by fighting back. These meetings became a source of strength and purpose. With Harold's guidance, we developed educational materials about elder fraud and began offering workshops at senior centers throughout the community. What had begun as a personal nightmare transformed into a mission to protect others. 6 months after Madison's letter, I finally wrote back. My response was shorter but equally honest, acknowledging her apology without offering the absolution she didn't request. I told her about my support group, about the educational initiative we'd started, about the garden I was replanting with Nancy's help. I don't know what our relationship will be going forward, I concluded. The trust we once shared is broken, perhaps irreparably. But I do believe in your capacity to change, to learn, to grow beyond this terrible chapter. You are more than your worst mistakes, Madison. You always have been. I sent the letter without expectation of response, simply closing a circle that needed closing. To my surprise, Madison called 2 weeks later, her voice tentative on the phone. Thank you for writing back, she said. I didn't expect it. I needed time, I explained. Our conversation was awkward, halting, but real in a way our interactions hadn't been for years. We spoke for only 15 minutes, establishing no plans for future contact but leaving the door cautiously ajar. A year after the night of confrontation, my life had found a new rhythm. The support group had evolved into a registered nonprofit organization, Elder Advocates, with Harold serving as legal advisor and Nancy as vice president to my reluctant presidency. We had secured a small grant to expand our educational outreach, and were developing a volunteer program to provide companionship to isolated seniors. I still lived in my home, though I had made changes. The guest bedroom where Madison had always stayed was now a home office for Elder Advocates' work. I had redecorated, choosing new paint colors and furniture arrangements that felt fresh and forward, looking rather than anchored in painful memories. My friendship circle had expanded beyond Nancy, Harold, and our book club to include many of the seniors I'd met through our advocacy work. Sunday dinners, once reserved exclusively for Madison, were now lively gatherings with rotating guests, filled with conversation and laughter. Madison and I had established a careful, limited relationship. Monthly phone calls, occasional emails. She had completed her community service hours working with domestic violence survivors, an experience she described as transformative. Our conversations remained somewhat formal, the easy intimacy of our previous relationship replaced by cautious respect and carefully maintained boundaries. Will you ever fully trust her again? Nancy asked as we prepared for an Elder Advocates Board meeting. No, iyan suara tunasli. But I'm learning there are many ways to love someone without giving them the power to destroy you. 18 months after that fateful night, Madison asked if she could visit. I agreed with both trepidation and curiosity. We met at a cafe rather than my home, neutral territory for this new phase of our relationship. She looked different. Her platinum hair returned to its natural auburn, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Most noticeably, the brittle, anxious energy that had characterized her time with Garrett was gone, replaced by a quieter, more grounded presence. I've been following the Elder Advocates website, she said after we'd exchanged awkward greetings. The work you're doing is incredible. It's given me purpose, I acknowledged. Something positive from something painful. Madison nodded, eyes downcast. I think about it every day, you know. What I nearly did to you. Who I became with Garrett. And who are you becoming now? I asked, genuinely curious. She looked up, meeting my gaze directly. Someone who takes responsibility. Someone who understands that intentions don't erase impact. Someone trying to make amends, not just with words but with actions. We talked for nearly 2 hours, the conversation gradually easing from stilted politeness to something approaching honesty. Madison shared details of her therapy journey, her volunteer work, her slow process of rebuilding self-respect. I told her about elder advocate successes and challenges, about the community I'd found, about my decision to finally learn to play the piano at 68. As we prepared to leave, Madison hesitated. I found some of Dad's old records in my storage unit, his jazz collection. I thought you might want them. The mention of Robert, of something he had loved that had connected all three of us, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I would like that, I managed. Madison nodded, then asked the question I sensed had been weighing on her. Do you think we'll ever find our way back to each other, Mom? Not like before, I know that's gone. But something new. I considered her question carefully, respecting its importance enough to answer honestly. I don't know, Madison. I hope so. I think we're finding our way toward something. What that will be, only time will tell. She accepted this answer with a nod, neither pushing for more nor retreating in disappointment. As I drove home afterward, I realized I felt lighter than I had in months. Not healed, not whole, but moving forward with integrity and purpose. The betrayal had broken something precious, but from those broken pieces, I had built something new, something sturdy and meaningful. That evening, as I watered the hydrangeas Robert had planted decades ago, I felt his presence as I often did in quiet moments. I survived, I told him silently. I fought back. I'm still here. The flowers nodded in the gentle breeze, their blue petals catching the golden light of sunset. Life continued, different than I had imagined it would be at this stage, but still mine to shape, to live fully, to fill with meaning and connection. I had lost much, but discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. I had been betrayed by those I trusted most, but found loyalty and support in unexpected places. I had been viewed as vulnerable because of my age, but proven that wisdom and resilience can be powerful weapons against those who would exploit others. Most importantly, I had learned that even at 67, life could begin anew. That even after heartbreak, joy remained possible. That even in the aftermath of betrayal, one could find purpose, community, and a way forward. I am Eleanor Johnson. I refused to be a victim. I fought back. And in fighting back, I found not just justice, but a new chapter worth living. What would you do if someone you trusted betrayed you? Have you ever had to stand up against manipulation or gaslighting? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found strength or inspiration in my journey, please like and subscribe to help others find this story too. Remember, we are never too old to fight for ourselves, to build community, and to create meaningful change in the world around us. Thank you for joining me today, and may you find the courage to face whatever challenges come your way.